Hello everyone. So I'm just waiting to see if the microphone is on. I installed Windows 10, I should say, and some things have changed. So I just want to make sure. Just bear with me for a second. All right, good. It's working. I'm just gonna wait a few minutes to see if people join up in the stream. Today I'm gonna talk about climate change and specifically about how certain companies invest in kind of pseudoscience agencies and they make it look like a legit investment when it's not. So just gonna wait a little bit. This thing could be a little bit higher. There we go. Okay. All right. Just to quickly update the people, well, my health is a little bit up, a little bit better, I should say. Up sounds like a video game or something, but it is in a way. But of course, I still have huge issues, and so it's still difficult for me to do this on a regular basis, but I will try. And of course, I have other things going as well, so. It's funny, every time I clean glasses, they just become dirtier and dirtier. It's like a magnet for dust and hair. So as I said before in the last show, I'm gonna change my shows a little bit. So now it's gonna be more quick. I'm gonna jump straight into the material, and so I'm gonna remove the intro, etc. So just give it a few seconds more, and I will start. If people want to participate in the chat, please do that, but be aware that my screen is kind of to my left, and so I have to turn my head, and it doesn't look very aesthetically nice, perhaps. So I will try to do my best to read the chat if there are any questions. When it comes to climate change, I am not a complete ignoramus. I read a lot of stuff about it. I interact with a lot of students in the field and, sometimes professors in the field. All the articles I share on the show are usually vetted already, so it just saves me a huge headache as well. I do my own measurements of temperature outside, so I definitely noticed some trends. I've been doing that for 4 years now. I definitely noticed some trends, and they just, yeah, it goes hand in hand with what the scientists are saying as well, even though I'm using quite amateur equipment. All right, so I'm gonna get this started because today I have actually 2 articles to cover, so why don't we do that? All right, so 3. If you have any issues with audio and everything, just let me know because I don't want to like record this and then it's no audio. But hopefully it's all fine. All right, so 3, 2, 1. Hey everyone, and welcome to Age of Reason. So today I'm going to talk about climate change and specifically about how certain big companies like Exxon and Mobil invest in pseudoscientific agencies whose aim is to basically disprove the science, perpetuate denial, etc. So today I'm going to specifically talk about ExxonMobil. They keep giving money to these agencies, and then these agencies basically confuse people. So you might think, well, that's not a huge problem, is it? Well, the problem is a lot of these people, normal people, average people, they don't know anything on the subject of climate change. And a lot of them actually, or a substantial, a very vocal minority, I should say, are thinking that it's a hoax, it is not happening, And all the science out there, it's just scientists enriching themselves. It's funny because I always see CEOs of big companies driving around in expensive cars. I very rarely, if any time actually, I see scientists, driving around in a Porsche or something. I'm sure it happens sometimes, but really that's not the point of science at all. It's not the point to get richer. It's just a way to understand the world. But I do accept that there is a certain gap, an education gap between what the science tells you and what the average person knows. And the gap is stronger with conservatives. So I did a show a couple of, I don't know, months ago, a couple of years ago, where I showed this, that the people who lean towards like Republicans, basically, they believe in climate change much less than Democrats. So that's a real thing, okay? We have to consider that. So here we have a picture. This is, some ExxonMobil dudes standing at the New York Stock Exchange. So, the stock exchange, we can talk about it all day long. For me, it should just be like illegal, because how is it fair that you, with your pathetic 100 shares of something, can compete with these people who own, millions of shares in certain companies? It's just not fair. And it's all speculation. I don't think people should be making money from speculation. So this is an article by Karen Savage, and she's basically saying that, yep, ExxonMobil gives money to certain companies or agencies who are actually renowned for denying climate science. And they've been spending a lot of time trying to do that, okay? This is not new. This goes back decades, actually. So here, in particular, they focus on a grant of about $60,000 between 2017 and 2018 to the American Council on Science and Health, ACSH. So these type of agencies, they always have some kind of fancy names, okay? Always some kind of, American Company for Progress or whatever. And it's always nonsense, okay? Don't trust these agencies. All these names, just beautiful names, but the reality is they most likely work against the average person, okay? So here in particular, this company, they have people like Patrick J. Michaels, who worked then about 30 years on behalf of the fossil fuel industry, Fred Singer, who last year wrote an article for the Wall Street Journal falsely claiming that sea level rise is not caused by climate change. I've had this argument on my page before, so I decided to look it up. In particular, what are they talking about? And this is the article that, they're talking about. The Wall Street Journal commentary grossly misleads readers about science on sea level rise. And this comes from climatefeedback.org. It's a great website. Please go there because they take a lot of articles which are, published out there, and they actually say, well, is the science true here or not? And so if it's not, they give that article, as you can see here, a very, very low rating. So if you see that kind of rating, that means that it's bullshit, okay? And you can read their reasoning why it's bullshit. Okay, so this organization is a front group for libertarian billionaires. I also get into some discussions about libertarianism. So I understand why a multi-billionaire would be a libertarian. Basically, it's somebody who wants less government and more oversight on their behalf, so they can control everything. But libertarianism also says that we don't want control. We want to be free and we want to make our own decisions, etc. But that doesn't work because these billionaires, they do want control. In a way, they will become the new government, That's what I'm saying. It's all nonsense. It's a fantasy thinking. Fossil fuel companies and basically every other industry selling dangerous products. Okay, so here the important thing is that corporations fund non-profits. So think tanks and trade groups, many of which are dark money organizations that do not disclose their donors to the public to further their interests without directly being tied to the group's work. So, of course, so what happens today is that you have a company like ExxonMobil, okay, and they're at the top of the food chain. So what they do is they're not gonna give money directly to, a political candidate, for example, or another big company. What they do is that they give their money to a sub company, and that sub company gives to a sub company, etc., etc., etc. So by the end of the road, it gets so difficult to figure out where the money came from. But if you trace it back, though, if you take your time and you go through all the loops, you do find that the money comes back to ExxonMobil. That's where it came from. But that happens all the time. This is not new. So what is the purpose here? Well, they're doing that to encourage denial and delay. So what these companies do is that they don't focus on the long term. They only focus on the short term. So tomorrow or next week. What is good for our investors? That's how they're thinking. They don't think about you, okay? They think about their investors and how a lot of these companies make a lot of money as well. Honestly, if you make $1 billion or if you make $1.1 billion, that's not a huge difference. But they get greedy. That's the thing. So libertarianism as well is very dangerous because you're placing your faith in people who we know are corrupt and greedy as hell. It's just not going to work. You need some oversight on these people, or otherwise it's completely out of control. So yeah, they do that, and then the key part here is that ExxonMobil continues to fund the ACSH despite the organization's position that climate change is a slow-moving threat whose consequences are in the medium to long-term future, not the near term. And that goes back to what I just explained. They only think about tomorrow, not about long-term. Okay, so there they talk about specific articles about the company. So the president of that company, Hank Campbell, Hanky, he critiqued the New York Attorney General's office for its investigation of ExxonMobil for possibly deceiving its investors on the risks of climate change. So I did a show about this. I talked about how these companies give a lot of money to disinformation. So this does not surprise me that the president of that organization critiques real science. And then, of course, and there's another one, some Al Gore article. Birzow said that in 2017, the world's biggest health problem is poverty, not climate change. So you see, they shift the problem somewhere else. They say, oh, well, the problem is not climate change. The problem is poverty. So you see these people living on Pacific Islands, their problem is poverty. It's not that the water is rising. That the water is rising doesn't matter at all. They're poor. That's the problem. But no, in reality, they're both interrelated. But they don't say that. These people will never admit that. Of course, if the level is rising and you're poor, you can't even do anything about it because what? You don't have any infrastructure to, elevate your roads or whatever. I mean, a lot of these people, we're talking about tribal conditions. It's basically like, huts made out of wood, very close to the water. And they, in fact, these people rely often on the water to feed themselves, etc. Nowhere, this is a key point again, it goes back to what I said before, nowhere on the ACSH website is ExxonMobil's funding acknowledged. Of course not. Of course, they're not going to do that directly. It's all indirectly. They have, I don't know how many proxy companies they have, but a lot. And so they give money to them, and they kind of trickle down to what their objective is, but of course not directly, of course. It's grown more publicly untenable for companies themselves to publicly deny basic science. Well, that's true. That's certainly true. We live in an environment where finally people are starting to wake up to the problem a little bit. But I did a show before, and I said that the banks in the US, they actually lag behind other banks like in Canada or Europe when it comes to diversifying their portfolio. They're still very, very heavily invested in fossil fuels. whereas Europe is moving away towards other projects, green projects. And that's pretty much it. We'll go back to this initial picture. I just want to say that another thing about the stock market I want to say here is that I believe that if you want true action, you have to really, cut off the head of the snake. And how you do that is that you do it in many parts, of course, but you can subsidize green energy. You can do that. So take away the subsidies from fossil fuel companies. These guys do not need more money, okay? Like, I need more money. Please send me money. But these guys don't need more money. They're swimming in cash. And also, okay, so if their position is that, they think climate change is a hoax, etc., it's not real, then what you should do is you should delist these companies from the stock market. Remove them completely so that they cannot even speculate anymore. They cannot play with their own money. That's how you achieve real action. Okay, and now I'm gonna jump into the next show, so just give me a second here. There it is. And okay, so I'm gonna move this one, I guess. All right, just make it a little bit bigger. That is not the first one. I think it's because of this, actually. Just give me a second here. Something's wrong. Now it's okay. Now it's correct. Just go back to the first one. Okay. Just while people are watching, I want to say that I don't over prepare these shows. I mean, I do read the articles, but I don't like go mental. That's the point. It's to kind of think about it as I go along, just like every normal human being should do. Okay. All right. All right. So yeah, 3, 2, 1. Hey everyone, welcome to Age of Reason. So now I'm gonna talk about the Fire Age. So when I even hear the term Fire Age, it makes me think of something from Lord of the Rings or something like that. They're gonna like forge their weapons. It's all fire industry, construction. But unfortunately, we are entering the Fire Age in the real world. You have many fires, and every time I go to like some news website, there's always some report about fire. The US this year had a lot of wildfires, which, for me, a wildfire is that if it starts by accident. But a lot of these fires are caused because they're trying to remove the forest so they can have more farmland or, just build something there. Pardon me for a second. So on any day, between 10,000 and 30,000 bushfires burn around the planet. That's a lot. And think about all the emissions from that as well. So you have your factory emissions, you have your individual emissions, and plus on top of that, you have these bushfires, which again, I said, not all of them are natural, okay? Sometimes, or often I should say, it's caused by people clearing the land, burning the forest, and replacing it with something else. So all of that is a very toxic process. The thing is, we're seeing fires from Siberia to the Amazon forest, Indonesia, Australia, California, etc. So I always said that, what, if Russia's on fire, then we're really truly in for the end. And I just want to explain something also. Russia is not like they portray in movies, okay? It's not always snowy there. It's not always cold. In summer, temperature easily goes up to 30 degrees Celsius. And about 10 years ago, they had really, really awful fires all around Moscow, so that there was so much smog that blanketed the city that people had difficulty breathing, and people had to buy air purifiers, etc. You had to shut your windows down, etc. So I mean that is happening. That's a real thing, and it should not be happening. Okay, like thinking about Russia, you'd never associate it with fires and hot temperatures, and yet that's what we are. That's where we are. It's time not only to think the unthinkable, but to speak it. That the world economy, civilization, and maybe our own very survival as a species is on the line. And it is past time to act. Well, I agree, and I've been doing this show. I've been, beating the drums about this thing, and people are just not watching. People are just not caring. So of course, some people are, and then what I'm preaching to the choir because they already know this material, and the other people don't care. It isn't just fires, it's the incessant knell of unnatural, human-fed disasters, droughts, floods, vanishing rivers, lakes, and glaciers, and the rise in billion-dollar weather impacts. Which, by the way, goes back to the taxpayer in the end. So you can say, what, this is not my house that got washed away. Guess what? You're probably going to pay for it anyway through taxes. It is the spate of extinctions, the precipitous loss of sea fish, birds, and corals, of forests, mammals, frogs, bees, and other insects. It is the march of deserts and the waxing of dead zones in the oceans. It is an avalanche of human chemical emissions, poisoning our air, water, food, homes, cities, farms, and unborn babies, slaying 9 million a year. I was reading that and I'm like, okay, unfortunately, or whatever word you want to say here, 9 million a year is probably not enough to teach people a lesson. If, let's say, the population of the world is 8 billion, so more or less, if 1 billion people were dying a year, then yeah, I think definitely we would be more proactive. So it is a numbers game. Unfortunately, that's the way that I see it. It's the possibility that there will be no Arctic before the end of this century and rising seas expelling 300 million from their homes. Again, 300 million, well, that might have some kind of impact, but I still think that if there was a higher number of people affected, maybe people would take it more seriously. It is the ominous seepage of methane from the world's oceans, tundra, swamps, and fossil fuels, threatening runaway heating 7 to 10 degrees or more. So methane, of course, is much more potent than CO2. There is less of it in the atmosphere, but it is more potent, and that's the cows, fracking, all that good stuff. Honestly, I have a health issue, so I had a horrible, horrible food poisoning, and I just cannot eat beef at all. I can't even look at it. So hey, I'm doing already a small service to the planet, and you know what? I can live fine without beef. Okay, so if I can do that, then anybody can do that. It is the rising toll of non-communicable diseases, killing 3 people in every 4. So yeah, that's a big thing, right? So if certain bacteria are in the permafrost areas, and now these areas which were permafrost, so permanently frozen, now they're thawing out, and so these diseases can come out. And always the big fear, the next big fear, is that there's a superbug, and we just don't know how to beat it, and then it will wipe out most of the population. That's a very realistic scenario, by the way. And of course, here they mention also that people spend a lot of, governments spend a lot of money on wars. So yeah, let's just buy weapons. And I recommend watching the movie Lord of War with Nicolas Cage, and you'll see how, it's such a great movie. You'll see how certain people or governments, they sell weapons to group A, then they sell weapons to group B, and then those groups fight each other with the weapons that initial country sold them with. But they make money. They already made their money, so they don't care. They already got your money. Yet, a global citizen movement of scientists, youth, elders, and women is demanding urgent action in the face of a growing risk of collapse. There was an article that I might have done, I'm not sure, but it was saying that collapse is not an end result. Collapse is a process, and we are very much in that process right now. So, Pope Francis is talking about it. I'm not sure how much sway he has these days. And so there's a professor, Jem Bendel of the University of Cumbria in the UK, is among voices warning that the collapse of civilization may have begun. I totally agree with that. That's what I've been saying. Collapse is a process. It's not an end state. It's a process, and we're in it. Because we cannot easily predict its space, trajectory, or magnitude. So it's no reason for inaction, he says. His paper says that there will be a near-term collapse in society with serious ramifications for the lives of citizens. Catastrophe is probable, it added, and extinction is possible. Yet so far, only a handful of countries, France, Canada, Britain, Ireland, and Argentina, have declared a climate emergency. Most governments continue to move at glacial pace and turn a blind eye to the 9 other megathreats menacing humanity. So why is that? Because a worldwide counter-revolution is underway, intended to paralyze action on climate, environmental loss, extinction, toxic air, water, and food. It is financed by dark money, which goes back to the thing I said on the previous show. From a terrified fossil fuel sector through shady institutions, like again I mentioned on the previous show. It pours hundreds of millions of dollars into global propaganda to discredit climate and environmental science, seduce government, and deceive the public. And they're certainly doing a great job at that. I have to give them, chapeau. And they're using the same strategies actually that the tobacco industry was using back then. They're cherry picking the data. They're parading, fake experts, some kind of people who absolutely sold their soul to these fossil fuel companies. They're not scientists anymore. They're just a talking head working for, ExxonMobil or Shell or whatever, any of these companies. More sinister still is the growing control of the fossil fuel lobby over governments in the world media, not just in Russia, China, Brazil, India, and Saudi Arabia. Now, a new UN report says fossil corporates plan to ramp up carbon emissions 50 to 120% by 2030, beyond the limit for a safe human future. Why? Because they don't care about the small people. They don't care about us. And basically that puts us on track for at least a 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is catastrophic, okay? I know that people might think, oh, wow, this summer it was 30 outside. With the effects of climate change, it's going to be 32 or something. I can still survive, right? But it affects the crops. The crops are very sensitive to temperature. There are feedback loops which we don't really know how they work yet, so it might be much more. I actually had a conversation about that in the summer. I couldn't believe it when I read it, but this happens a lot actually on online interactions. This was on a Facebook climate change page where I get some of my information anyway, so I know it's legit. There was this one guy who claimed to live in Portugal, and he was honestly telling me that because this year in his place was a little bit cooler than usual, then that means that climate change is a hoax. I was like, seriously, you dumb idiot. This is not about your little spot on the earth. It's about the global average temperatures. That's why it's called global climate change. It's not your house's climate change. It's global climate change. But there are stupid people like that out there. There are many, many people like that out there. And what we should do is not give them a pass or, say that, oh, well, give them the benefit of the doubt or, make it look like a 50-50 issue, because it's not. We have to ridicule them and shame them for being so stupid. That's how you do it. That's how you at least push people into some kind of corner, because these people think they're safe right now. Nobody criticizes them for their idiotic opinions. So yeah, they do it. They keep doing that. So I say corner them and make sure that they stay in that corner and don't give them any chance to come out of there. there are only three motives to so hazard civilization: greed, malice, and ignorance. Well, that's certainly true. So the greed comes from the corporations, and malice too, by the way. And then the ignorance comes from the people. So we can definitely fight the ignorance part. Okay, we can make people more intelligent. People can read more, educate themselves, which I do on a daily basis. So I don't see why others can't do that on a daily basis. Greed and malice, though, that's more difficult to counter because honestly, I think most of us have a certain degree of corruption. You know, if somebody brings us a suitcase and there's $1 million in there and they just leave it there and walk away, it's very hard not to go and grab it. Okay, that's the reality. So I'm not better than anyone else in that respect, but we do have to make an effort. The thing is, like, we can make sure that people benefit. So for example, Andrew Yang, who's running for president, he proposed the UBI, which, it's not a new idea, but it's a new idea for the US. Although Alaska does it. Alaska does a system like that, and it's based off their fossil fuel revenues, so people can benefit from that. And I think that's a good thing. It should be countrywide, nationwide. Either the returns are so great the fossil fuel executives are willing to cook their own grandchildren, or they are blind to the risks. Since these are technical people, the latter does not ring true. Oil majors like Shell and ExxonMobil have revealed in court they understood exactly what they were doing to the planet for nearly 50 years. Ignoring it, then they sought to deceive humanity while ramping up carbon output. ExxonMobil knew about the risks 50 years ago, okay? And they basically said, well, sorry, we know the risks, but how much money we put into our pocket is much more important than you. Who are you? This little, piece of shit living in a small ass apartment. They don't care about people like us, okay? And the world is dividing into two opposing movements: the concerned survivors, the young, the old, the wise, the educated, the informed, and the pragmatic, and the cynics backing the very global system that will precipitate collapse. So I certainly agree with that. That's what I'm saying. We should not give these people some kind of free airtime and some kind of spaces so that they can propagate their basically disinformation about science. They don't know anything about the topic and they have an opinion. I don't see why we should just pay attention to an opinion which is not based in any fact. So yes, the world is dividing, but what we should do as informed, educated people is that we need to ridicule bad ideas, like we ridicule religion. We can't give these people any airtime to spread their bullshit, okay? So we have to ridicule them and we have to shame them for being so stupid, because stupidity is your own doing. You did that to yourself, man. I didn't make you stupid. You're stupid by yourself, by not studying, by not reading, and by spending time in kind of alternative fact website like Breitbart or Fox News. I didn't push you to go there. You did it to yourself. Some scientists' estimate for how many lives collapse will cost range from 50 to 90% for the population. The number is not knowable because human behavior as war cannot be foretold. The process starts with famines and water crises, both already in evidence, leading to refugee tsunamis and multiplying conflicts. Yeah, that's certainly true. As this truth sinks in, the part of humanity committed to survival is seeking legal redress. Well, let's just say some things that need to be said. Doing nothing or too little sentences humanity to collapse: economic, societal, even existential. It is time to discuss this openly, honestly, truthfully. And yes, like I said, you need to shame and ridicule people who really propose stupid ideas out there. They think that their opinion, because they have an opinion, that they're suddenly a king or something. They're not. We have only one rational choice, and that choice is to survive. This demands all necessary actions. So people were, this summer, Greta, I forgot her last name, she went to, she came from, this girl from Sweden, right? she went to the US to speak to people, etc. And a lot of people started attacking her. So for me, honestly, I don't see her as any threat to my show or to my integrity or whatever. Uh, she doesn't, I don't know, it feels to me that it's very kind of scripted in a way. And I wish her the best. We need all, this is not a small tent, this is a big tent. We need everybody in it. We need people like her as well to go out there and say stuff. Uh, to be maybe even a bit alarmist, etc. I don't particularly like her tone sometimes and the way that she phrases things. But look, she's a kid, and so she can inspire this masses of people, which I can't do. I can't seem to do that at all. People don't watch this show. People don't listen to me so much. So if people listen to her and it leads somewhere, great, fantastic. So the way that it's going to work is that it's going to end the existing systems of energy, food, water, money, defense, transport, and politics. Every aspect of our lives need to change if we're serious about fighting climate change. There was a meme where, some politician asks, "Who wants change?" And then everybody puts their hand up. And then he says, "Who wants to change?" And then everybody just stays quiet. And then he asks, "Who wants to lead change?" Everybody disappears from the room. The room is empty. So I certainly see how that is happening. And the replacement with new ones, so we need to transition very aggressively to climate, green, like solar panels, etc. University dedicated to a viable, just, and sustainable human and planetary future. And that's it for this article for this week. Well, I just want to thank you for watching. Join me next time and I'll cover more articles. Thank you and bye-bye. Well, that's it. Just gonna leave it running for a couple of minutes. If somebody's watching and has any kind of question, now is the time to ask. And I'm not gonna stay too long today, so now is a good time. Well, it looks like there is nothing much happening, but anyway, this is going to be kind of the new format of the show. Definitely faster, and so I can cover more articles in a day. That's kind of the point. So hopefully I can keep doing that. I don't know. Depends on my health. It's up and down a lot recently. Okay, I'm gonna end it here, I guess. For people who are watching, thanks for watching. I hope it's educational. I hope people take something away from this. It's not just attack, attack, attack. Not like mainstream media is doing, which, well, let's be honest, they're ignoring this completely, or almost completely, I should say. It should be there should be a story on climate change every day on CNN or whatever, and it's not the case. So, all right. So again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.